let's move on. One more question. One more question. What is the best way to invite students to Christ? Now, there's all kinds of ways and methodologies. You know, a lot of these methodologies we see are not in Scripture. It's just our cultural way of doing things. And Jesus had no problem telling somebody, hey, you, follow me, right? There was no, and of course, that's cultural for that to happen. Rabbis and followers and in doing that, that's what we see if we're talking about biblical models, that's what we see. But some of the other ways that we see, there's standard ways, right? There's, come to an altar. There's raise your hand. There's talk to a leader after service. There's, like I said, just follow Jesus, right? So I don't know if there is a correct way. I'm going to say that there's not a correct way of asking kids to come to Christ. I will say that the way you invite students to Christ, requires that follow-up on the other end needs to be strong. That's part of the discipleship. If you're asking somebody, to pray a prayer, well, then you gotta have a follow-up with that to say, well, what did we just pray together? What does that mean? Right? There has to be some discussion over that, because otherwise there are kids who pray prayers all the time, but it means absolutely it goes into the void, right? That commitment just goes into the void. So if you say, come to an altar, well, I think that is good because you're having that one-on-one time with them to be able to pray with them. You're talking with it. It's not just prayer. It's also conversation. It's also, why did you come to the altar? I've done that. I love praying with kids at the altar. I love inviting kids to come to Christ that way because it's an opportunity for a conversation, a one-on-one conversation that I'm not going to get maybe throughout the rest of the youth meeting. I'm going to go ahead and have that conversation with them as to why did you come to the altar? And sometimes kids coming to the altar has nothing to do with them wanting to follow Jesus. It has everything to do with them being broken. It has everything to do with them not having a great day. And I just need to talk to somebody. I need to pray with somebody. I need somebody just to help me with no commitment level, right? So when you ask students, I think it's good to ask students. That's one way to do it, is asking kids to come forward if you have the dynamics to do that, if your service lends itself to those dynamics, because I think there's some value in that. Raising hands. Nothing wrong with raising hands, right? You're saying, look, I ask kids if they, say, hey, look, you don't want to embarrass kids. I get it. But if we want to be biblical about it, Jesus wasn't ashamed at all. No matter who was no matter who, Peter, John, whoever, in front of their families, in front of groups of people, Jesus didn't care. He was like, come follow me. He was unashamed to say, come follow me. And we also, as youth pastors, should be unashamed to say, I'm asking you not to pray a prayer, although you will. I'm not asking you to be religious. I'm not asking you just to come to an altar. I'm asking you if you want to follow Jesus. And that's what discipleship is saying, I'm asking you to follow Jesus. And then the breakdown of that, the teaching, all the things of that come after. If you're going to say, hey, raise your hand, you could always say, take the next step. If you're going to say, raise your hand, take the next step, say, come to the altar. Or listen, you're the one that has your eyes open, that you need to go to those students afterwards that raise their hand and say, hey, buddy, I saw you raise your hand. Can you tell me more about why you raised your hand? I just think that's, you have to have that conversation. I know for us as youth pastors, sometimes it's hard or embarrassing, or you're an introvert or any of those things. And I think you have to get over that if you want to see a discipleship process go forward. So yeah, come to an altar, raise a hand, but have a conversation, and then talk to leaders after service, right? You can say, hey, if you prayed this prayer with me tonight, I want you to come talk with me. Now, the issue with that is that you're allowing the student to decide, and that's perfectly okay, but you're allowing time between the time you say that and the time that they would come to you. Now that the distractions come in there, right? There's, service is over. So in their brain, they have checked out. Service is over now. The religious moment is over now. I'm hanging out with my friends. I'm doing whatever I'm doing. So I think it is important that when you say, come talk to a leader after service, say, look, we have somebody standing right here or in the next room or whatever. Maybe you say before dismissal, Say, look, if you raised your hand, we are going to invite you right now. We're going to give you 10 seconds to say, look, if you want to come talk to somebody, we want to talk to you. We want to hear more about why you want to follow Jesus and how we can help you do that. If you just step right out these doors and go over here, or if you just step right over here to this corner over here, we have myself or another adult that's standing there. And I think that's okay, because I think there is a natural, if a kid really wants to follow Jesus, if he gets that in his heart, then nobody's going to stop him from doing that. He's going to pray that prayer. He's going to mean that prayer, and he's going to do that. But I also think that us as youth pastors and facilitators and meeting creators and all those things have to allow that student as a straight a shot without distractions, without doing that. And yes, like I said, the kid that comes forward who regardless of anything else, if he's made a commitment and he wants that information, he's going to come do it. There are some who will have a little more trepidation, a little bit more fearful, and you're giving them permission to come pray with somebody, come talk to somebody. So yeah, I would say and then the straight follow Jesus. Listen, there's all kinds of ways you can call kids to Christ, just like I just described here. But if you just say, look, I'm asking you to follow Jesus. I'm not asking you to join the church. I'm not asking you to, know everything about the Bible. I'm asking you just to follow Jesus. And so, if you want to know more about what that means, then you can have that. If you want to have a prayer time with them, you could just reverse the process and say, look, instead of me leading you in a prayer and then telling you how to follow Jesus, I'm going to ask you to come follow Jesus, and then I'm going to pray with you. Nothing wrong with that, because you're asking them something very specific. You cannot misconstrue. You can misconstrue asking Jesus in your heart, because that means something differently to some people. Praying a prayer, getting forgiveness, feeling better about myself. This prayer clears me of all charges, or whatever the mentality is. You can't misconstrue following Jesus. Jesus, me following Jesus. What he does, I do. And how I find that out is I read scripture, I pray, I watch the example of other believers. You can't misunderstand that, because you're saying I'm asking you to follow Jesus. So there's no bad way to call a kid to Christ. There's only ways that are setting up the next part of the journey, setting up that next part. So choose whatever way you want to choose. Just make sure that there is a next, whatever next is. If you're going to ask kids to pray a prayer, then make sure that you're one-on-one connecting or allowing them opportunity to have conversations. Because if you don't have the next step, then that's why maybe you're not seeing the commitments of those who are praying go forward, or moving on in their journey, or joining a small group, or understanding their Bible, or whatever that may be. So, but that is it. That's what I think. I think that's I think those are ways you can invite kids. They're not, no one of them is the best, but they're all opportunities. So let me know down in the comments though, what do you think about your way? How do you lead kids to Christ? I would love to hear from you.